everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my sewing room. I am super excited to get started on today's project. We are diving into a brand new pseudo-historical cosplay. It is definitely like historical fantasy and also a cosplay. And it is one that I mentioned in my 2023 plans video. So if you saw that video, you already know what I'm talking about, but it involves this absolutely gorgeous shot silk dupioni. It is a blue pink, and that is because I'm making Aurora's dress. So when I saw this fabric at Memo Fabrics, I think it was, in the fabric district this last year when I went down for costume college for a super cheap price, I knew that I had to have it and I had to make an Aurora dress out of it. So that's what we're doing. And then for a while I was actually kind of torn about what sort of design I wanted this to take. Whether I wanted this to be true 100% cosplay to the movie except make it pink blue, or if I wanted to do an actual like historical version of this, whatever century that might be, you know, whether that was medieval, which let's face it, a strictly medieval dress was never going to happen because I don't like that silhouette on myself, but whether that was, you know, medieval, Victorian, Edwardian, etc., I definitely toyed with the idea of doing an Edwardian or like turn of the century type dress. But then I was getting into conversations on Instagram. I'd kind of like posted a poll about this way back in November at this point. And Kirsten Arson over on Instagram, she messaged me and sent me this gorgeous sketch that she made, which is like a sort of fantasy historical interpretation of the dress, and I instantly knew this was the dress I had to make. So I asked her if there was any possibility that she would let me use this design, and she said absolutely yes. And so I'm very excited because this is the sketch or the design that I'm making for my Aurora. So basically this design is kind of an amalgamation of some different sorts of inspiration. So one of them being obviously the original Aurora dress from the Disney movie. Second one actually being the blue dress that Angela Lansbury wears in The Court Jester, which is gorgeous, but would not be very flattering, I feel like, on me in the original form that she wears it. And then the third one being this velvet bodice from Frida Leopold, I'm probably saying that wrong, but over on Instagram, who I believe was inspired by the Charles James Petal dresses from the 1950s. And honestly, looking at the Charles James Petal dresses and realizing that that came out just like a few years before Aurora came out, I'm like, I think that's what Disney was inspired by too with the animators for the Sleeping Beauty movie, because I mean, there's nothing in history that is like the Aurora dress, but when you look at the Charles James Petal dress, that sure bears a certain resemblance to Aurora's dress. And so I think that the sketch really does a fantastic job of like rolling all of those inspirations together and just making a really wonderful, beautiful, cohesive design. So that is what I'm going to make. I'm super excited about it, and I am so ready to dive in. So I'm not sure how far I'm going to get this week because I actually have a special visitor arriving this week. You might know her because she is a costumer as well. Kiralee Cosplay is arriving this week, so there will probably be some other video content coming out this month that will be, you know, Kiralee and I doing shenanigans. I'm very excited to meet her in person. We have been friends now online for like 2 years. No, more than that. Oh my gosh, it's almost 3 years I think at this point. That's crazy. And because she lives in Western Australia and I live in the other WA, Washington, we've obviously never met. But she's coming here in like 2.5 days. So I'm gonna see how much of this project I can get done before then. Definitely mock-up and hopefully cutting out the bodice and putting that together, maybe even doing skirts, we'll see. So as far as the plans for the pattern goes, I actually have this right here, which this was a mock-up from when I made Anna Frozen Fever for myself, and I had cut apart or ripped apart half of it so that I could use it as my pattern, and the other half was still together. So I have these all pinned right now. I'm gonna put them all together, but this was kind of the only like corset bodice pattern that I've used in the past that is a princess seam pattern in both front and back. Obviously, this is not going to be the 100% for this, but if I can get this to fit through the body, like from here down through like probably the high hip area, then I can extend this and make it into those petal shapes over the hips. And I can also change the neckline because these straps are shoulder straps and they will need to be off the shoulder straps. So I'll change those over. This was not originally worn over a corset, and this dress is going to be worn over a corset. So we're gonna see exactly if this fits. If not, I do have one other pattern in mind, and that is actually Simplicity 2881. This is a pretty old one, and it is what I used as the base of my bodice that I made for my like black and gold check plaid, this one right here. Back in 2021, I went and I like did some rejigging with this bodice, so you may have seen that video. I'll link it up here if you're interested, but basically turning it into a quick change bodice. So I know that this at least is close to fitting, but I didn't really keep good notes about what I did with the pattern pieces. So that's why this is a second choice. This is better as far as like the neckline goes. It's more what I actually need, but I just don't know what changes I made to this pattern. So hopefully this will fit. I'm gonna go ahead, sew these 4 seams together and try it on over my corset, and let's see how many changes I need to make. Well, I've got the mock-up here, but I'm honestly not sure whether it is even worth it to try to use this as my base. The biggest issue is that the front is tiny and the back is humongous. So like if I pull the front closed, which I cannot quite do over the bust, but I have like way extra room in the waist. This side seam though is here. It should be here. So like that's a pretty big difference. I mean, we're talking probably like 2 inches difference here at the waist that it is off. And then beyond that, the princess seams over the bust, I do not know what is happening there, but they are not bust shaped. So I just don't know whether it's worth it to try to attempt to use this as my base and tweak it, because it needs so much. Like if I put this on the side where it should go, if I put the side seam on the side where it should go, the bust dart is going off that way. The bust dart is right if it's here. It's weirdly shaped, but it is right. So I guess it's really that it's the side panel that it is way small, I suppose. I don't know. It is very funky. And then the back is just humongous. So I might stare at it in the mirror for a few more minutes, see if it's something that I can tweak into submission. And otherwise I will start from scratch, potentially using that other Civil War dress pattern. That other mock-up just seemed like it needed so much work to make it work. So I decided to make a whole new mock-up that would also have like the hip sections and everything, except that somehow this mock-up is enormous. Like literally my side front seams can come together. I don't know how that happened because this is a size 22. This is based off of that Simplicity pattern that I showed you. I don't know how this happened. Like, what? And it seems to be mostly the front pieces actually that are so big, because the side seam is on the side seam. So I don't know what's going on here, especially because it's the back pieces that I did the most alterations to. So I'm gonna look at this in the mirror inside out and see if I can figure out what happened and if I can fix it. So I undid this seam and then attempted to put the center front, like where it's pinned together, on my center front and the side on my side. I didn't actually pin them in place, but I tried to keep them there anyway. And then I kind of just like pinned this seam back together. So basically I like the width of the center front pieces, except actually at the waist where the center front is too narrow for what I'm going for, particularly because this side panel, I can't have this much interruption without a dart or it starts to get super wrinkly. So where I've drawn in this pink line, that is the furthest out that I can go this way from a side panel before wrinkles really start to occur. So I need to actually widen the center panel by probably a 1/2 inch at the waist and take it out of the side, which is really where it's too big anyway. This is all taken out of the side. So I've just kind of drawn that line in of where the new seam line needs to go on the side. It's really hard for me to fit the back, but I know that the back has this much excess because I just pinned it out. That said, all of the excess again needs to come out of the side back. So I'm gonna fix the fronts first and then go to the side. It's also like the hem is just, it's all wrong. Like it's way too long on this front pedal, and then the hip pedals, I think the hip pedals are actually maybe pretty decent, but then there's like not even pedal shapes here, and then it's too long in the center back. So I need to fix all of that, but I have a lot to fix. And then of course these two also just never met up in the first place, which is good because now I'm cutting away this one. So yeah, I have a lot to fix. Let's take this apart and put it back together again in hopefully a way that fits me a lot better. Well, I did all of those alterations and somehow made it too small in the waist. So that's not great. The bust, on the other hand, seems way, way better now. I think the straps are still a little too long, but yeah, the bust is pretty close. It's just that I can't really like check all of the fit when it is too small in the waist and I can't like pin it shut. But like the side seam now seems to be in the right place, so it must have just been that I took in too much. I mean, I did not cut new front panels, so that's probably the issue, because I had already mentioned that I did need to cut new front panels to make it a little bit wider here at the waist. So that is probably the issue. It's just that it's a lot more than like the 1/4 inch from each side that I was expecting, because at this point we've got like probably a 3/4 inch gap in between, and then of course we need the seam allowance. Though that said, to be honest, I would really love to be able to cut the front panel on like one piece, so there'd be one piece here and then the side pieces and no center front seam. This is currently the straight of grain, so I was hoping that would work. So I think what I need to do here is cut new front panels that are wider at the waist, and I think that will solve the main fit issues. Again, I am gonna take these in some more. I did already take them in a little bit. It clearly was not enough. I also need to figure out, like, the angle doesn't seem quite what I want. I mean, I don't love a super off the shoulder, so although Aurora's dress is very off the shoulder, although like the court jester dress is very off the shoulder, I don't want it super off the shoulder. So actually that might be just about okay, to be honest, where it is right now, because it's off the shoulder but like not off the shoulder, if that makes sense. So yeah, the waist thing is the biggest problem. I do need to figure out the pedal shapes. There's way too much fabric here in the back, so I think I just flared it way too much because I want it to basically look kind of fitted or sculpted over the hips as opposed to like a tail. I also have not yet cut the extra length off of anywhere in the back. I did off of the front, so I think the front length is what I want. I just can't tell yet till I get new front panels. So I'm gonna go do that first, and then I'll figure out the rest of these issues. I think we are getting quite close. Like, I almost want to say that we're there, but I'm not sure that we are. For one thing, obviously this shape is not right, like right here, because these two pieces aren't matching now that I've tweaked them so many times. So I do have to fix that little bit. I still wonder if this is a little loose, and I'm, I guess, kind of concerned that honestly I might not know until I try to set sleeves in it and it like falls off my shoulders. I mean, I want it to be a little off my shoulders, but if it falls, it will create weird wrinkles here. Speaking of weird wrinkles, I am getting wrinkles still here in the waist, which means that something is not allowing like enough space, and I'm just not sure where. And unfortunately, I think it is right here. It needs to open, but obviously that's the middle of a piece. It can't open. So I'm not 100% positive what to do about that issue, but that is why you see darts in bodices here. And I think it's a matter of like my seams probably needed to have been even farther out, but I'm kind of tired of like tweaking all of those seams, and the rest of it seems really good. Oh, though speaking of seams, I'm a little bit concerned that I am actually going to have to cut a center front seam. I was worried about right here for one thing because it seemed a little tight when I was pinning it on, but I think it's actually working. It's possible that the tightness here is causing this wrinkle, like it's redistributing oddly. I'm not sure that that's true though. I might try loosening that a little bit and seeing, but either way, even though I keep taking in this seam right here of the center front pieces, I also keep needing to take in this little bit right here, literally like this top 1.5 inches. I keep needing to curve it in despite trying to take it out here instead. And I've taken it out now at least 2 to 3 times right here, so I don't know that I can like keep doing that, if that will make an effect. But obviously if I need to curve this in, then I would need a center front seam. I couldn't have it with no seam. So I think I'll try one more time to take a little bit out more here. We'll see if that will work. I did do some tweaking in the back pieces here as well. I'm not sure that it's really the right effect. I think I cut it too short, maybe. I'm not positive, but I feel like now it's a little bit on the short side. The center one I think is still maybe okay. It's the rest of this that feels a little bit short. Like I want it here instead of here. So maybe I can just cut that longer, like in the silk, we'll see. But it's definitely closer, and I think the petal shape is working. I actually wound up taking, so these side back pieces, I took a huge amount out of the sort of peplum down here. I took like, I don't know which piece it is now on my sewing table because I have so many cut off pieces, but I think I took a piece that was about this wide at the bottom and removed it on both sides to get kind of that more fitted look. I am a little bit concerned that I potentially want to see what this looks like over skirts, because this bodice obviously does go over the skirts and needs to fit there. It makes me kind of wonder, should I actually make skirts tonight instead of cutting this out in the silk? And that way I could try on the bodice over the skirts. Yeah, so I think I might actually do that, but then there's also the question of what type of skirts I want. So generally speaking, when I'm talking about like princess dresses, I like a circle skirt. But this is shot fabric, so if I do a circle skirt, it will literally be like pink one way and blue the other way as it rotates across the grain. So it's not gonna work. I also kind of like, from the Frida Leopold stuff, I kind of like how the tight pleated look underneath this like fitted sort of bodice. So I think I want something that is at least gathered at the top. So I'm thinking gathered gores for the skirt. So I'm gonna pull out my fabric and put some stuff on a dress form and see how it looks. So what I'm now trying to decide is what direction should the silk be in. So basically over here in this little section, what you're looking at is the silk that is going with the grain. So like the grain is running vertically, and what that means is like the Dupioni slubs are running horizontally. Now I think because of that, you actually get a lot more body in the folds. The other thing that I'm noticing with this section is that in general, I feel like it reads blue, and then the pink is kind of in the folds. See how when you open up the folds, you see that pink, but in general, I feel like it reads more blue all the way down. Now, this section over here is going against the grain. So if I went against the grain, I could literally, if I decided to do like a flat panel skirt, I could just literally gather up the whole top and then do like one seam in the back, which would be really nice. Now that said, I feel like you get a lot less body. It has a crisp feeling as opposed to like a puffy feeling, if that makes sense. Like this part over here, when you press the folds with your hand, they feel puffy. They have their own body, whereas these just feel crisp and flat. The other part that's interesting over here is that I feel like it is reading pink on the lower half and blue on the upper half. I'm sure that's some effect of light versus shadow, but yeah, it's definitely like blue and then pink as opposed to sort of pink, blue. So I'm trying to decide what I like, because I do like the look of the slubs running vertically. Like it just gives sort of a line. I mean, you don't even see them very much because the color is so distinct that honestly, they kind of just blend in. But there are vertical lines running that way because of the slubs. But I do really like this body over here. Now I know neither of these colors are really Aurora pink or Aurora blue, like her pink versus blue dresses. These are definitely more of like almost a bit of a turquoise in the blue, and then obviously pretty fuchsia in the pink. So I don't know that it really matters if it's like more one or the other, but yeah, that's where I'm trying to decide right now. I'm leaning towards that way, even though it will mean a lot more work. But then again, more seams equals I can put pockets in it easier, so I suppose there's a good in everything. I just thought you all should know that this drama queen is upset that I'm staring at the skirt and not at her. So she's trying to be really cute right here on the ground. I get your tummy. I get your tummy. Oh, look at that paw. Hi. Okay, so back to the skirt. So I just called my mom to get her second opinion on whether she liked this side more versus this side. She also said this one, and this was really what I was leaning towards as well, just because I like the uniformity of the blue, pink, as opposed to like blue and then pink. So yeah, we're gonna go with the green, which I mean, I suppose is good. And I'm gonna have to cut this into panels. I am not sure though if I need it to be gored at all at this point. I'm intrigued at the idea of what would happen if some of them were going this way and then like basically I cut them every other. I don't know what that would do, but it would obviously give me more yardage to play with in the gores, like more to be gathered and more flare at the bottom. But I don't know with this fabric if it would be totally weird. So maybe what I'll try to do is I'll try to flip a section and see next to this if that does anything strange. The good news is that it really doesn't make a difference if you're like going, basically that's the very top of my yardage, it's the very bottom of my yardage, and they're flipped. So that does not make a difference. However, I also realized that it really doesn't make sense to do this because we're looking at what, 55, 60 inches across, something like that. And to get the opposites, I would wind up with like a whole extra seam because basically we'd be talking about small triangle, and then big triangle, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And I'd have to seam those together to get the one in the middle. So yeah, we're talking a lot of extra seams in gores like that. So I think it just makes more sense to do it as a flat panel. I'm doing so much yardage here that it's not like it's really gonna lack spin factor, I feel like, and it will give me that sort of tightly, densely gathered up here look if I'm using quite a bit of yardage. So I'll have to figure out how many panels I can do depending on how much yardage I actually have. I don't remember how much I bought, but there's the yardage. It's all piled there. And obviously I need enough for bodice and sleeves, but yeah, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and start cutting skirt panels and then we'll seam them together, put some pockets in, gather it up, and hopefully by the end of tonight I will have a skirt. So I feel like this could be super overkill, but I just measured this all out. I have 10 yards plus like this extra bit, so it's like 12 inches here and then a little wider down here because that was where they had cut swatches from. And yeah, I have 10 yards plus that. And I did the math of like how much length I would need and then how many panels I could do. I could do 5 panels actually, like 5 widths of this fabric. So in other words, all the way around, I still haven't measured the width of this, but all the way around, it would probably be something like 250 inches around, which is a lot. But the thing is, like, that would take up 7.38 yards basically. So that would give me plenty left for bodice and sleeves because I estimate that I need probably no more than like 1.5 yards, but I'm going to be safe and say 2 yards for bodice and sleeves. So yeah, that would be fine because I'd have more than 2.5 yards. I'd have almost 3 yards left for bodice, sleeves, etc. And I could do the rest out of this immense amount of silk, which I think would be beautiful and scrumptious. By the way, I am planning to put this over a hoop skirt just because I'm wearing this like as a fantasy type thing. Obviously, they wouldn't have worn hoop skirts. And in fact, I don't even think, I'm trying to remember back to when I worked at Disney, I don't even think Aurora wears a hoop skirt. Like all of the other princesses wear hoop skirts. I don't think Aurora does. but I want this to be grand. This is a small-ish hoop. It's the same one that I wore under my 1850s dress. So it's not like 1860s size hoop going on here. And then I've got a ruffled petticoat on it and just a plain petticoat on top, though I might change the order of those because the plain one seems a little tight-fitted to the ruffly one. But yeah, I think I'm gonna go with the super, super gathered. The only thing that scares me about that is not doing gored. That means that I also have about 250 inches of silk all gathered down to about 40 inches. That's a lot. And I wasn't planning to like cartridge plate this or anything. I was literally planning to gather it. Silk obviously does gather pretty decently, but does it gather that decently? That I don't know. So it could be that I cut those panels, the 5 panels, and then it kind of forces me to gore the panels, which that's not the end of the world. I mean, obviously it would mean that I'd put them together and then have to take them apart again, because the other option is running test gathering stitches right now to see how densely I could do it, which I suppose I could do that in a small area and then just like math up that ratio. That's not a bad idea. I'm gonna give that a try. I'm gonna gather a test piece right now, just like along the fabric, see how densely I can gather it on the machine, because I don't even know if I can cartridge plate 250 inches down to 40. That's a lot. Well, good news, I did my test piece, and this is one 54-inch panel gathered down to about 8 inches, which is exactly what I need for the skirt. So that means that gathering will work just fine. It looks really nice. Like, I love the body that this direction has by doing it on the grain. So I think that's gonna look so gorgeous. And yes, like cartridge plates would probably look neater, but I did this in like 3 minutes. So I like that. So yeah, I can go ahead and rip my panels, because I'm just going to rip these, and then put them together with pockets, of course. Now, the way that I measured these was really just to see what I needed for like waist to floor in front, waist to floor inside, waist to floor in back, and then I added a couple inches for hem, and just because I always seem to cut things short, so I added a couple of inches, and then I'm just going to put them together and then hem them so that like I know that a 52-inch is not going to meet a 53-inch. You know, the side is going to be 1 inch longer, and I will just taper that and it will be fine. But that way I don't waste yardage by like cutting them all 54. So there's my front panel. These skirt pieces are now all assembled, and the gathering stitches have been run at the top. There are pockets here, and all of that's all good, but obviously I have not yet put the waistband on, and unfortunately I am out of time for sewing tonight. And because I'm out of time for sewing tonight, it may mean that I'm actually out of time for sewing for this video, because Kiralee gets here tomorrow morning. I was hoping to like have the bodice done, but it just made more sense to switch to the skirt. But unfortunately I didn't get it to a point where I could put the skirt on underneath the bodice mock-up, despite wearing it the entire time that I was making that skirt. One thing that I did do with the bodice mock-up that I didn't tell you about before, trying to relieve the wrinkles here, was I opened up this seam right here, and as you can see, it's kind of wanting to sit open. There are still wrinkles here, like I can feel them, but I think they're less than before because it is pulling less below the waist. So I do think that I will need to extend the pieces, probably, yeah, the front piece for sure. I'll need to extend the front piece a little bit more, I guess about 1 inch by the time it reaches to the bottom. But yeah, I will definitely have a lot more tweaks to work on this once I put it on over the skirt, because like I'll know about how the back needs to fit too, the back little peplum tail bits, whether the length is right, whether the width is right, etc. The rest of the bodice I think is doing really quite well, so I'm not too worried about it. One other thing that I noticed though was, if we go back to the sketch over here, I noticed that the lines for the front princess seams actually go out, and so the strap is really part of the center piece as opposed to part of the side piece like I have it. I don't know if this is going to bother me, like that difference or not, because I do realize, especially because I have taken in this piece here, my princess seams curve in quite a bit. Now obviously I've been wearing this inside out, so it's hard to tell how obvious that is going to be on the outside, and honestly I won't even be able to really tell until I have it in the silk. But I don't want to cut it in the silk until I know what I like. But like with the silk, because the angle, it might treat differently against the seam. I honestly don't know. So yeah, when I go and work more on this mock-up, I may wind up completely switching around these front two pieces so that my princess seam does go off like that, because that is a prettier line. But is it prettier enough to be worth redoing this? I don't know. So yeah, definitely more mock-up stuff to come. That might be in a next video. If I do have more time to sew though, then that will be next, and otherwise what you'll see next will be the outro. I'm going to go ahead and finish this skirt for this video, even though it is now the next week. I'm putting the waistband on right now. This is just a 4-inch wide strip in both cotton organdy and also in the silk that I have torn across. It's 4 inches longer than the length of my waist measurement, and that gives me a little bit of like an overlap for the waistband, plus of course seam allowance. Now I'm going to serge these together to flatline them and then put them right sides together on the skirt, flip it around the other way, and stitch it down in the ditch. The waistband is now on. Honestly, the skirt over the hoop skirt is giving like so much body now because of the texture of the dupione, just like how much body is in the fabric itself, that I am thinking, after all, I don't think I'm going to use the hoop skirt. So I'm probably going to take that off and see what it looks like without. Hoops are off, which means there's just the ruffled petticoat and the plain petticoat underneath. I do think it would probably work well with the corded underneath that, but the body is definitely better. So now that the skirt is all finished, I have decided that that is going to be it for me on this week's progress on Aurora. I am going to try redoing those two bodice front and bodice side pieces to get the different princess line. I am going to try redoing that, so that is going to be in next week's video. And then if that works, great. If it doesn't, then I have a bodice that's pretty close that I'll be able to try on over the skirt now, and then move forward with the actual putting together of the bodice. Now, one of the other developments that has happened while I was working on this past week was I went to a couple of Joann's around the area looking for the chiffon that I wanted for like this hanging sleeve detail, because the main body of the sleeves is going to be made out of the pink blue shot, but I wanted the sort of chiffon flowiness to be the hanging sleeves, and then like a white chiffon, ideally an iridescent white chiffon that will be kind of just like a loose drape around the shoulders to get that like Aurora white bit thing that always looks, in my opinion, really awkward on her outfits. So I went to some Joann's. I didn't really look for the white, to be honest, but I was looking for ideally a pink blue shot chiffon. Did not find anything like that, and I found like there's this, and there's actually a pink blue shot version of this, but the problem with this, besides the fact that it sheds glitter everywhere, is I really wanted something lighter and more ethereal, and this is obviously not, like you can't see through it at all. Also, the backing is just plain, and I really want something that can be seen from both sides because it's a hanging sleeve and I don't want to have to line it. I did also already have this fabric in my stash, which I don't know what exactly you would call this fabric, but you can tell it is a pink blue shot, much lighter colors than those. I don't mind the lighter, but again, we have a backing that is plain, and again, it is not sheer. So I don't want to use those. So Kiralee is actually going to the LA Fabric District in a couple of days, or like next week, I guess, and she is going to keep her eye out for blue pink shot. I have found a couple of places online that do it as well, so I'm requesting a swatch from one place. It's actually a blue pink shot mesh, but if Kiralee can't find it there, then I will just order it from this one US company who seems to sell it. Everywhere else is China, and one of the Chinese shipping dates was like, it could arrive January 13th to February 27th. which, you know, of course is like 5 days before I would have to wear this. So I'd really like to spend just a couple dollars more per yard and get this from someplace local if Kiralee can't find it. But yeah, so that's coming. Hopefully the swatch will be here in next week's video so I could show you that. Obviously stuff that Kiralee sends me won't be here for like at least over a week, probably more, because it'll have to also get shipped up from LA. So we'll see what she finds. Hopefully she'll find something, but I have a feeling this project will not be completed next week, and most likely I will kind of wind up completing the full project except the hanging sleeves and then come back to the project again later once I have that fabric with me. But other than that, that is going to be it for this week. So we'll get to all of that next week. So if you liked this video though, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube twice a week, with my sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays and other costuming content out on Saturdays, but I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks right here on YouTube. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patrons, Sharon, Mirage, and Laura. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!